So aloha, welcome everybody to Finding Stability in Times of Instability. Mahalo for joining us on this beautiful Friday. We have, it looks like about 20 folks that are joining us online, so mahalo. Just want to go over a few things if this is your first time on a Zoom webinar. Let me just change this. So my name is Lisa Kanoi, and I'm the engagement specialist for the Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship Program. And if this is your first time to a Zoom webinar, just want to let you know that this will be recorded and shared with everyone that registered. And for future reference, let's say there's a webinar that we have that you really want to watch, but you are busy or have a schedule conflict, as long as you register for our webinar, you'll get the recording afterwards. You may exit at any time. We value your time, so if there's something else you need to tend to, that's okay. And attendees are unable to view each other in webinar mode. However, we can see all the participants' names that are attending. And for the questions, you can use the Q&A feature. That way, all the attendees can see your questions. And the difference with the chat is only the panelists and the host, myself, are able to see the chat if you decide to send your questions through that way. But either way, you can use both of those. And also, if this is your first time, you will automatically be added to our email group for future presentations. And then also at the end, there will be an evaluation that automatically pops up when you leave or when this webinar ends. And if you could take a minute to complete that, that would be greatly appreciated. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest speakers today. So Kyana-lei Yamada is a third-year graduate student at Pacific University's Doctor of Psychology program in the Forensic Psychology emphasis. She is currently an intern at the Oregon Center for Change, where she provides group and individual therapy and individual assessments. Kyana was born and raised on Maui, but has lived in Oregon since 2014 for college. She is a current Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship recipient. In her free time, she enjoys creating art, trying new recipes, and watching Netflix. Dr. Kahanaaloha Kuikahi-Duncan is a clinical psychologist with the Department of Education Kauai District, servicing 4 elementary schools. She was born and raised in Hilo, Hawaii, and is the 6th of 7 children. Kahanaaloha is a past recipient of the Native Hawaiian Health Scholarship and Minority Fellowship Program through the American Psychological Association. She likes to start her mornings with a workout and black tea and spends her spare time with her husband and 2 daughters. So we'll go ahead and see if they can come on. Okay. All right, you're all set.
Okay, great. Mahalo nui, Lisa. Aloha and good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, whether you're watching the webinar with us this morning or you're viewing the recording. Kyana and I are so grateful for the opportunity that we have to be here to speak with you guys, to share a little bit of our mana'o on something that we feel is very relevant to what we're all going through right now. So as Lisa said, the talk of our presentation or our talk story today is finding stability in times of instability. And we'll be looking and talking about the effects of COVID-19 and how we can nurture our health and well-being during this time. This has undeniably been an interesting, for lack of a better word, interesting time for all of us. This COVID-19 pandemic has brought on unique demands that many of us have never really faced before. It's taken time to adapt. It's taken time to really find our groove. And despite a lot of work that we have put in to, adapt to these changes, some of us kind of still find ourselves questioning our actions. Are we doing too much? Are we doing too little? Am I doing the right thing for myself and my family? And we're really here this morning to tell you that you're not alone. We're all going through the same experience. And we really hope that what we share today will resonate with you, and that you'll be able to find a couple of takeaways that can help you either in your life or help someone find that stability, and build that resilience that we really hope that can help in your life. Okay, we can, next slide. So we're going to start off with a poll. We're hoping that we can get some engagement. I know it's a little different being, over a computer versus in person, but we'll be doing a few polls throughout the presentation, as well as posing some questions that we'll ask you guys to respond in the chat if you're able. So the first poll that we have is just a question: how do you greet people you know? So with everything going on, how do you greet people? And you can go ahead and answer the poll there. Do you hug in honi? Is it that awkward no honi but still want to hug? Do you give the fist bump, elbow bump, shaka, or maybe something else? If you guys can go ahead and answer that. Okay, it looks like almost everyone.
Yep, that's everyone.
Okay, awesome. Can we, is there a way to show them, or can they see the results? Okay, awesome. So it looks like the majority, there's an other, so other ways to, to greet other people. We got some hugs and honis, that awkward no honi hug for a couple of people, and then also the fist bump. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys for doing that. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we have some learning objectives for today. Like we said, we hope that what we share resonates with you, but we do have some things that we want you guys just to keep in mind as we're going through the presentation. So the first is to be able to identify 2 signs that you or someone else may need support. The second is identifying one self-care practice to promote health and well-being. So we'll talk about a few today, but we know that everyone has a lot of things going on. So if you can just kind of identify with one thing that you'll commit yourself to do to practice self-care, that would be great. Identifying 2 community care practices that can be done while social distancing, and identifying one way in which people living outside of Hawaii can really create a home away from home to promote resilience. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the first thing we are going to be talking about today is change. Change is inevitable. We're going to go through change throughout our life, but I bet you probably didn't realize or think that in a short 5-month span, you would be going through as much change as we have. I think when we think about change, sometimes it can be really scary because it's that, the fear of the unknown. So change sometimes is hard, and we wanted to take some time to make sure that we discuss that. We discuss changes that we've gone through. So next slide. We're asking, what are some changes that you have gone through recently? And if you can go ahead and utilize the chat at this point to just share some changes that maybe you or someone else has gone through recently, whether it be in the past few months, weeks, days, even hour. Today, some changes may have taken place. So if you can go ahead and maybe type some responses in the chat, and we can have some type of dialogue. Distance learning, oh, that's a big one. Yeah, distance learning, working from home, right? So a lot of the in-person contact has been limited. What else? Telecommuting, working from home. Yeah, that's a big one. Not going to the grocery store, online, using online means to get our necessities. Working on being healthier. Okay, awesome. Not being with family. Yes, these are all changes that we can, I think, definitely identify that we or someone else know. No family barbecues. Not seeing family.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think that one big change that I've experienced was that kind of like what everyone else is saying about not being with their families. I think I definitely appreciate my interactions with my family a lot more than I did before.
Yeah,
Because of
absolutely. Right, helping kids with online schooling. Yes, I've heard that that's been, and that's also been difficult. We have some, so I work in the school setting, but we have some families who have children in elementary, middle, and high school, and they're all on different programs. So having to navigate 3 different programs, you know, with multiple teachers for your middle and high students, that has been a challenge for a lot of people. Creating a garden, yeah, that's a big one. I know a lot of people creating gardens. And beautiful gardens. I need help with mine. Okay, all right, next slide. Okay, so working from home, loss of a loved one, not being able to spend as much time around family, not being able to visit home. Yes, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so here are, Lisa, and you can kind of just hit the space bars. So COVID-19, this has been a really big change. A lot of you have said not seeing family and friends. You know, what about canceled trips? That was a big one. I hear, you know, that was, I think when COVID-19 first started in March, that was about spring break. So a lot of trips were planned. It's summertime, trips were also planned. So trips have, you know, having to be canceled. I heard a lot of people wanting to go to Disneyland, but they ended up closing their parks anyway. So that didn't happen. School schedule changes, right? Some dates were being pushed back. I know schools finally open, but now the majority of schools are doing distance learning. The stay-at-home order, right? So recently for Oahu, there's a stay-at-home order. So transitioning back, you know, to that type of lifestyle, working from home, limited contact with others. Some people have moved, budget changes. What about wearing a face covering, you know, having to wear something for most of your day, nationwide issues, as someone mentioned before, having to order now through online platforms instead of going to the grocery store, sanitation regime, sanitize, sanitize, sanitize. Also a loss and change of jobs. Oh my goodness, I mean, the unemployment rates, you know, are skyrocketing. And there's really, especially for, you know, Hawaii, being really driven by tourism, when we're looking at hotels and restaurants, I mean, they really don't know when they're going to reopen. So a lot of people are, you know, facing that unknown, and it's causing a lot of anxiety for them. Loss of family and friends. Some emotional and mental health changes have taken place during this time. Just our basic sleep and diet have changed, overall health changes. Gym closures, I see, right? Having to work out at home. There's great programs on like YouTube, or, you know, I see so many people now, fitness and trainers, implementing or trying to put forth home workouts for people because gyms are closed. So they're having to adapt new ways to find, to maintain their healthy lifestyles. A big one was life reflections. You know, I saw so many times on social media and just hearing from people that this time they were really allowed to slow down and focus on things that were really most important to them. And so this was a big time, I think, to implement those life reflections, or to have the time to be able to do it. Increased stress for some people, and we're going to be talking about feelings that have been brought on by COVID. New procedures at work, just increased demands, having to balance multiple demands simultaneously. And then another one that people have mentioned is just access to care. My daughter is in her second year of preschool, but I had to schedule her physical. School started already, in August, but her physical is not till October, and she turned 4 in March. So that just kind of goes to show that doctors, the way that they're seeing their patients now are very different, and they have it separated between healthy versus sick children is what we've noticed in the pediatrician's office. But just access to care in general, that is also being limited. Some providers are going to telehealth, so we're really having to adapt to these new changes. Okay, next slide. Okay, so how do we react to the change, right? We talked a little bit about how in such a short amount of time, although change is inevitable, we have gone through, just a ton of different changes were thrown our way. So how do we react to that? And I have a short video that we're gonna show, and we're calling it Resilience, and we hope that you guys enjoy it. So take the time. You're gonna have to read. So there's some music, but you're gonna have to kind of read through this short video.
Let's try that one more time. How about now?
Yep, I can see the screen now.
Sorry about that. Sorry, trying to get back to your PowerPoint. Did you want to do the poll?
Yes, yeah, so we'll go ahead. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. So based on that, we have a poll to ask you guys about, are you a carrot? Are you an egg? Or are you a coffee bean?
All right. Let's launch this poll.
All right, so if you guys can take some time just to go ahead and answer that poll. I thought, you know what, I should have put like another option on there. I should have put like all of the above, because I feel like personally sometimes I can be that coffee bean, I can be resilient, I can be supportive, I can be that person that people need. And then sometimes I fall apart depending on what it is. Sometimes I just can't handle it anymore. And then other times I might be bitter or upset because of a situation and really have to kind of process what I'm going through to get back to my baseline. But it's, the more that I thought about it, I'm like, gosh, there should be like an all of the above option. Okay, so it looks like we have majority of coffee beans. Woohoo! Awesome. I think that's definitely what we want. We want to see more coffee beans. But it takes hard work. I see here that, yeah, depending on the situation, we have a person who's the hot water. All right. Yeah, all of the above, right? So it kind of just depends what we're going through. And sometimes we're able to persevere through it, and other times we need that help and support. And so that's something that, we'll be talking about today. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so now we're going to talk about feelings. Woohoo! I know how ironic the psychologist comes here to talk about feelings, but this is important. We've talked about the experiences that and changes that we've gone through over the past few months, and so now let's talk about how we've been affected by it. Emotionally, I think it's kind of been a roller coaster. And you can go to the next slide, and we'll just keep it at the. Yeah, I can just keep it there. So, when we think about feelings, it really depends. Like, we're thinking about how resilient you are. It depends on your feelings as well. I think it depends what you go through, and they're fluid. Our feelings are pretty fluid. They may change depending on what changes we've faced, what experiences that we've gone through. And I just want to point out that whatever feelings that you've had during this time, they're valid. I think that it's safe to say that although we've all experienced very similar things, we handle it differently. So whatever feelings you are experiencing during this time or have experienced, know that they are valid. And so I guess you guys can kind of share in the chat, what are some feelings that you guys have gone through or have experienced during this time? If you guys wouldn't mind sharing. Information overload. Oh, yeah. Uncertainty, frustration, some peace, resilience. Kika, if you don't mind me sharing. So that is so true, right? And something else that I wanted to say is that this time hasn't been all negative, that there's really been some positive feelings that have come out during this time. And, as you're noting there, is that we may experience a myriad of feelings. And I think that's typical. Anger, frustration, a lot on your plate, right? Then a sense of hope, the whole spectrum, feeling loved, fulfilled, to over a feeling of I don't care. Mm-hmm. Yeah, pule more, right? Trying to find that peace, trying to, get that compassionate. a roller coaster of emotions, some high, some low, a lot of lows, but really big, meaningful highs. Thank you for sharing dips and highs and lows. Yeah, I mean, these are, I think you guys are seeing a lot of similar things, is that we've been going through a lot during this time. And again, I want to emphasize that what you're going through, your feelings are valid. Looking inwards and feeling them all to work through them. Okay, Lisa, can you, there's some things on this slide, so you can go ahead and, yeah. So some people feeling nervous, small and vast, some people's thinking and attitude, absolutely. Babette, thank you for sharing. Just how people are, their attitude towards this entire situation is very, very different. Again, some people are taking extra precautions, and others may have reached that point of frustration, like enough is enough. So we definitely have that spectrum of people's attitudes towards this. So some people are feeling nervous, just that unknown, right? Not knowing what to expect, not knowing the potential effects of this virus. So just, that unknown. Some people are excited. So they're excited to try new things, this distance learning. I know some teachers are really excited to be launching a distance learning program, to be doing things online and to be utilizing, just computer-based things. Excited for opportunities to maybe find a newer meaning or a meaning in life for them. Some people are feeling anxious, scared, worried, happy, fear around the uncertainty of the virus, more thoughtful and reflective, some apprehensiveness, maybe a little bit cautious, grateful. This is a really big one. So I want to share an experience. So when COVID first started, we went on spring break here in the school, and I'm a 12-month employee, so I continue to work during spring break. But then COVID happened and schools were closed, so we never went back. So that meant that while I'm trying to work at home, both my husband and I were trying to work full-time from home. We had our preschooler and our toddler. So trying to work full-time, trying to give my preschooler some type of academic support or exposure, because we really felt that, okay, she needs to do something. Like, she can't just watch TV all day, or, she's got to do something. And then just trying to tend to the needs of my toddler. That was hard. So I am one of those people who was incredibly overwhelmed from the get-go. It was a really, really, really tough time. And there was a lot of tension in our home, because it's just, we were filled to the brim of, expectations and trying to wear multiple hats simultaneously, all these different demands thrown at us at once. So the first, maybe like even couple of months, they were pretty difficult. There was a lot of stress in our home. And then I started to see, so many people saying like, oh, this time is so wonderful. Like, I'm so grateful for this time because I get to slow down and, I get to reflect on things. And my initial reaction was like, seriously? Like, how is this relaxing? Like, how are you able to deal with this? Because that relaxing was the last word that I could think of during that time. But the more that I, started to now look at my situation, so I kind of went falling apart. I was that carrot, and then became upset because my situation I felt was incredibly overwhelming. I became that egg. And then as time went on, I'm like, gosh, you know what? I really have no control over what's going on around me and what's going on in the world, but I can control how I react to the situation. So it took some work, but I'd say, when mid-May came around, I really started to see that gratitude for our health, one, just for the time that I had with my family. It was rarely, although it's, we don't have immediate family here on Kauai, we rarely got that quality time with just the four of us, interestingly enough. So just reflecting on those things and really trying to count my blessings and be grateful and practice gratitude daily. I give a lot of thanks to my family, my parents and my siblings, because they, we're always talking about practicing gratitude. And so it's that constant reminder that I think I need, and I'm so grateful for, to count our blessings daily. Paranoid, some people are feeling paranoid, judgmental, right? So just feeling judged on, am I doing what's right? Or I know a lot of parents were like, okay, prior to everyone going to distance learning, they were going to be sending their kids to school. And so there's that fear of being judged by other parents, like, oh my gosh, they're going to judge me because how could I send my child to school with COVID going on? Or, the flip side, how can you keep your kid home during COVID? I mean, there's so much judgment, I think, going on. And that happens a lot of times when we're experiencing something new, something different, when we don't know what to expect. Lonely, this is a huge one. And I'm so grateful that Kyana is going to go into this in terms of like her experiences and just this isolation piece. I know we talk about like social distancing, but I think that term sometimes it scares me because we shouldn't socially distance ourselves. Physically distance, yes. But the truth is that a lot of people are now feeling very lonely because we're so used to having that face-to-face support. We're so used to socializing, and that's such a big part of human nature in our culture that now we're having to really be creative and think of ways to still get that support while physically distancing. Irritated, that, yep, that definitely happens. Bored. So sometimes, just feeling bored and you're stuck at home, you don't have things to do, feeling guilty, stressed, just feeling for those who are suffering, fear, again, around that uncertainty. Thank you guys so much for sharing in the chat. I think it really helps with that dialogue piece, and just it shows right here that, we're all going through very similar experiences. Okay, so next slide. So the reason why I wanted to talk about emotions is because they're actually important, you guys. They actually matter and play a big role in our life. I'll try to go through this quickly, but they matter for attention, memory, and learning. So when we're looking at positive emotions like joy, that helps us attend better. It promotes greater engagement in what we're doing if we're feeling good. Whereas anxiety and fear, that generally disrupts our ability to concentrate. It disrupts our ability to think clearly, to participate in discussions. If, we're focusing or we're worried about something else, then that has a lot of our attention. So we're unable to focus on things that maybe should be getting more of our attention. Emotions matter for decision-making. I think there's that big cardinal rule, right? Don't make decisions when you are experiencing a heightened emotion, because they say that, whether happy, like super, super happy, or feeling really down, don't make decisions during that time, because they say that our ability to make decisions is really that it's hijacked. Our brain becomes hijacked because we're acting on emotion. I'm sure you guys have heard of that before. So it's important for us just to find that even keel baseline where, we can think through things clearly. Okay, next slide. So emotions also matter for relationships. They give us cues, right? We learn from a young age about social cues, about how to respond to others, about empathy. And so emotions really help us form and maintain relationships throughout our lives. They matter for our health and well-being. How we feel influences our actions, right? It influences our thoughts and vice versa. And then emotions matter for performance. So when we're looking at, a lot of people mentioned stress. Well, chronic stress is linked to, a decrease in motivation, a decrease in engagement, which essentially leads to burnout. So we have to be aware of the emotions that we're experiencing. It's so, so important. Okay, next slide. So this next slide here, I just have that, anxious and depressive feelings are contagious, and so is joy and compassion. There is this idea of the elevation effect, that when we see compassionate service or when we see positive things going on in the world, that sparks our joy and compassion, or our positive neurons, and that motivates us to also want to engage in compassionate service or, being helpful. And so I definitely encourage everyone, everyone out there who's listening, who will be watching later, engage in more compassionate service, because that there's a ripple effect, and that we can eventually make a big difference in our world if we each take one little step to make someone else's day better. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we are now going to talk about trauma. So, you can hit it. There you go. Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys a question. When you guys hear the word trauma, what do you think of? And you can go ahead and type that in the chat. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of trauma? Generational effects, children, hurt, uncertainty, injury, fear, unexpected situation, lived experience. Awesome. So sometimes, people think of like veterans or like this big injury, gun violence, just like mass shootings, experiences that have a negative impact on a person. Awesome. So you guys kind of get the idea that trauma is not just these really big events that happen. Next slide. So studies actually show that trauma is actually pretty common. Next, yep. Can keep going, yeah. So exposure to trauma is pretty common. I think they say that 90% of adults experience some potentially traumatic event in their life. I did want to say though that trauma doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna develop post-traumatic stress disorders. I think it's really important. I wanted to talk really briefly on the 3 E's of trauma. So as you can go next, but essentially there is an event that has to happen, right? There's an event that has to happen, and then there's an experience that we have of that particular event. And then for different people, there's an effect. And so there's essentially 3 components of trauma. And so this can be really different for everybody, and I'm sure is very different for everyone. Just like the carrot, the egg, and the coffee bean, right? There's a spectrum of effects or resilience when we're faced with a potential trauma. So I wanted to look at COVID-19 trauma because it in fact has been pretty traumatic for a lot of people. Go ahead. So just the work strain, right? Juggling multiple demands at once, the financial strain, if jobs were lost, if we're a couple, if one or both partners, social isolation, that has been really traumatic for a lot of people. Our suicide rates or suicide attempts have increased significantly. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, all stemming around not having that social piece. The fear of being exposed to COVID-19, the fear of exposing others. If you're out and about working, that fear of, oh my gosh, I have to go home, or okay, I can't see this person, and actually being diagnosed with COVID-19. I think there's a lot of stigma, and we've had conversations about just being exposed to someone who has it, and the fear of exposing others, and the stigma around, gosh, I feel fine, so can I just not say anything, or do I have to tell them? And that fear of potentially being judged because of it or looked down on. But just the traumatic experience of being diagnosed. I've heard horror stories of how this coronavirus has fully taken over people's lives, and some people have passed away, and people are fighting for their lives every single day for this 2-week span, and then there's lasting effects. The death of a loved one, I know that someone mentioned that, just losing a loved one, the lack of or delayed access to support services and medication. So these can all have a significant impact. You can go to the next slide. So I'm not going to really read through this next slide, but essentially what we are talking about is there's oftentimes these underlying experiences. So COVID-19 happens, but prior to COVID-19, people were already experiencing trauma. They were already in environments where they used to get reprieve from it because they'd come to school or they'd come to work. But now that people are now, where they're a stay-at-home order, or they're not working, or they're no longer in school, they're being exposed to these stressors pretty much 24/7. So it exacerbates really the effects, the negative effects that we see for a lot of people. So just, I'll mention some: that emotional, physical, sexual abuse, witnessing violence, addiction, right? People turning to alcohol or other substances, separation or divorce, incarceration, the stress, of one parent, or if it's a single parent trying to care for their children, having all these different demands of distance learning, you know, potentially being laid off of work or having to work while children are doing distance learning, having to figure out daycare. So there's a lot of things going on right now that can be incredibly traumatic for a lot of people. Next slide. And so we wanted to talk about, well, how do we even know that we need support? Because some people, it's hard to identify that they're really struggling. And sometimes it's because of that. Sometimes it's because of the pride. You know, it's like, no, I'm fine. I'm strong. I can handle this. But I think it's important for us to be aware, and if not for us, if for other people that we know, you know, signs that they may need support. So heightened emotions, I think initially when COVID started, I could definitely sense that I was a little more irritated. You know, I could get frustrated easier because there were so many demands being placed all at one time. Definitely feeling, you know, feeling more anxious, that it affects people's functioning, their ability to function in everyday life. Lacking motivation, just feeling more tired, overwhelmed, or burned out. If you notice those things, you know, just encouraging others to practice that self-care, and we'll go into that. Physiological pain, right? Headaches, body pain. Sometimes we attribute, or when we're feeling stressed, we experience it physiologically. So that's something to also be aware of, just physical pain that people might be experiencing. And sometimes we express it as physical pain because that is easier sometimes to explain or express versus I'm feeling really down, or, you know, I'm feeling really depressed, or I'm really anxious, or I'm upset. Physical pain sometimes I think is easier for people to tell, like there's physically something wrong with me versus emotionally something wrong with me. So sometimes physiological pain, that's a big one that people might express it as. Trouble sleeping, trouble concentrating, significant gain, a change in weight. Just that if people become socially isolated or withdrawn, just being aware of those things, an increase in alcohol or drug use, and just any thoughts or feelings of helplessness that someone might express. Okay, next slide. So how do we practice self-care? Okay, so we looked at change, we talked about things we've gone through, we've talked about feelings that have come up, potentially traumatic experiences for us. So how do we nurture our health and well-being? How do we nurture resilience within us? Next slide. So here are just some recommendations, or just some ideas really, daily reminders. So I know all of us probably have our smartphones. I have reminders every single hour, and it's just positive things throughout my day. And I'll admit sometimes I just ignore it, but I think it's so important for us to stop. You know, in the busyness of our lives, it is so incredibly important to stop, to take that deep breath, look at what you have to do, and then continue. I want to say, even though it's 5 seconds, I hope it's more than that, but, you know, just taking that time to stop sometimes is so important. Like I mentioned before, not necessarily, you know, social distancing, but physically distancing, but making sure that you have that social support. That is so incredibly important, and part of our human nature, part of our culture, to be social, to share, to be with others. So making sure that you find ways and be creative. And Kyana will basically, she'll share that in her presentation. Attending to our physical health, so whether it's exercise, meditation, or lomi, giving service. So random acts of aloha, I saw this on social media. I think it's so wonderful. People just go around doing random things, random acts of aloha, and they like hashtag it. You don't have to share it with anybody, but I think that just encourages, right, that compassionate service, just giving to those who might be in need, or just doing something nice for somebody, just because. Setting boundaries, this is a good one, just setting limits, setting boundaries for yourself, you know. So if you're working from home now, maybe turning off your work emails, or making a commitment to yourself that you won't check your emails after a certain time, or, you know, you'll silence your phone after a certain time. Just setting those boundaries for yourself, because I mean, we need that, you know. Self-care, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And so we really need to make that time to take care of ourselves. Scheduling me time, taking that time for you, taking a break from the news. I think the news it's informative, but sometimes it's so inundated with negative things that, like I mentioned before, right, those anxious and depressive feelings, they're pretty contagious. So the more that we're watching and we're just flooding ourselves with negative news, whether it's on TV, the newspaper, your phone, whatever it might be, that actually fires our depressive and anxious neurons as well. Not saying that you're going to be depressed, but those neurons are starting to trigger. So when I say that anxious and depressive feelings are contagious, that's true. I mean, studies have shown that. And so that's why I'm encouraging that. So are joy and compassion. So let's do more things, you know, thinking about our news. What if we shared more acts of service or great things that was going on in the world? That could spark, that could motivate us and, you know, spark interest to have us do more small things to, you know, whether it's random acts of aloha or just different things to make a positive impact in others' lives. And the awesome thing is that when you give service, that feels good. So it's not only great for someone else, but you feel great in turn. So definitely recommend that. Just daily reflections, looking at your days, at your highs, you know, things that you did well, and then maybe some things that you want to get better at, you know, for tomorrow or the next week or the next month. Just a lot of that self-reflection, allowing yourself to feel your emotions. So I think oftentimes there's this message in society that when you express your feelings that, you know, you're weak because of that. No. I mean, it may not be appropriate to flip a table if you're out in public, you know, but finding a place where you can express that, you know, those feelings or that frustration in a healthy manner, by having a positive outlet, practicing that gratitude, time management, right? Prioritizing what's important and making sure that you have that time again, prioritizing time for yourself. And then what's super important, that what we really wanted to drive, is to seek help if you need it. You are not weak because you need help and support. I think that it's an actual strength for people if you're able to say, like, you know what, I can't really manage what's going on right now. I need help from someone. So that's something that we really want to just emphasize, is seeking that help. And then at the end, we have resources that we'll share for you guys at the end. Okay. All right, Kyana, take it away.
Okay. So on the note of random acts of aloha, I'll be talking about community care. And before I get into it, I kind of just wanted to pose the question, and you don't have to type it in the chat, you can just think about it. But how many of you have heard of the term community care? And we can go to the next slide. So community care was defined by Nikita Valerio, who's one of the most prominent voices for community care, as people committed to leveraging their privilege to be there for one another in various ways. So it's a somewhat newer concept that's recently become more popular in light of recent socio-political movements. And community care is very much in line with Hawaii's collectivistic values and ways of being, since it's about being there for each other and engaging in compassion-based acts of kindness that benefit more than just yourself. And we can do that in really, really simple ways. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. But researchers have reported that community care can positively impact your well-being. And Valerio, the woman that I was talking about earlier, says that we require validation from one another to psychologically persevere and be resilient. And that's where community care offers something different. We're doing it together and trying to survive in a system that's built against us. I also think it's really important to note that many people think that community care is the opposite of self-care, or that one is better than the other. And the reality is that we need both. It's a bi-directional relationship between the two. So we need self-care to engage in community care, and we need community care to engage in self-care. We really can't have one without the other. Next slide. So here's a list of what community care can look like. So it can be small things like checking in on friends or family, cooking a meal for or with someone. One of my favorites, sending funny memes to someone who's feeling down. My friend did that for me last night and it brought my mood up a lot. Reminding someone to take care of themselves and validating that need for self-care, especially during this time. It can be something like letting someone merge in front of you in traffic, tipping a cashier or waiter a little extra, being fully present in a conversation. And I think that one's really important because a lot of the time we're engaging in these conversations and sometimes we're not all there and we can't really respond in ways that the other person would like us to respond. And so when we're fully present, we can really take everything in and we can really be there for them. So that's super important. It can be watching your friend's pets, or if your friend doesn't have pets and really likes animals, letting them watch your pets. Normalizing someone else's anxiety, depression, or low mood during this time. Holding the door open for someone, greeting your cashier and saying thank you to them. And it can also be somewhat bigger things like volunteering your time somewhere or sharing resources or being a resource for someone. So in the chat, now that you know what community care is, I want to ask, when was the last time you engaged in community care and what was it? Yeah, checking in on someone can make all the difference. Mm-hmm. Yep, calling sister in mainland, saying mahalo to cashier this morning, moving out of the way of the shopper, and smiling, although with masks on. That's really good, yes. Donating money to a nonprofit organization, supporting local businesses last night, dropping off food to elder aunties and uncles. Yeah, all of those are really, really good. Actually, right now in Oregon, there's a bunch of fires going on right now. And so one way in which I've seen people engaging in community care is by offering places to stay or helping their friends evacuate. Sending a text to a dear friend 10 minutes ago. That's really good. Every week I visit an older friend, buy food, massage her. Yeah. Yeah, so these are all really good ways that you've been engaging in community care. Checking in on Oregon friends, yep. Okay, next slide. So I felt like it was really important to highlight some of the important pieces of community care. And so first, you have to be compassionate and empathetic. We need to recognize that almost everyone is struggling in some way or another during this time. And having that compassion or empathy for others can really motivate us to be there for them. We also need to be kind and we need to have grace in our interactions with each other. We have to be willing to engage in service at some level because that's really what community care is being willing to provide service for someone else, even if it's in very small ways. We have to be flexible with how we engage in community care, and we have to be flexible because of social distancing rules. And it's really been about finding creative ways to engage in community care. And lastly, we have to be authentic in what we do and our motivations for what we do. So we can't just engage in community care because someone or I told you to do it. You have to do it because it comes from your heart and because it you'll be helping someone else. And so with that, I want to talk about community resilience, which is what community care can lead to. The root of community resilience is that within the community, there are shared values and beliefs. And with COVID, there's a strong innate need for us to restore order to the community. And we can do that by engaging in community care. And so when we feel a loss of order in our community, it's really important to begin by making meaning of everything going on. And so trying to make it make sense, in other words. And in a community, this is done through shared efforts to make the current situation easier to manage, and having empathy. We're all going through this. It's a collective trauma, and most of us have lost something from it. On that same note, we can build resilience by having empathy for one another. We need to be as understanding as we can be towards one another, since this has been tough on everyone. And this is where we can bring the self-care piece into community care. So being kind to ourselves, and that can help us be kind towards others. This leads me to mutual encouragement and affirmation, helping each other keep our hopes up. A little bit goes a long way with this one. So even just, checking in, like I said, or sending friendly text messages to someone to encourage them when they're feeling low. And creativity is the last piece of this. So during this time, like I said earlier, we've had to get creative with the way that we connect with each other, and how we plan things and how we celebrate things. And so creativity and innovation is a key component of being resilient during this time. Resilience is greatly predicted by strong social support and adaptive meaning making. So this means that although many things are predicted by genetics or sociocultural factors, resilience isn't necessarily like that, and it's been shown, in fact, to be a learned behavior. So when we see others engaging in community care, giving back, or staying strong during these times, our resiliency to mental illness and burnout and distress increases. And this is why it's so important during this time to come together and to always consider how the community will be impacted by your actions. Next slide. Okay, and so now that we've established that, I'll be talking about how we can build communities away from home. So right now I am in Oregon, and I am not able to be home with my family right now because of grad school. And so things kind of feel really far away, and it almost feels like I'm not able to connect with them the way that I would like to. Next slide. And so I think we have a poll here. And so the question I wanted to ask you all is, how many of you have children or other relatives who are currently living on a different island on the mainland or in a different country? And actually, I think I should have put an option for like all of the above, or I'm sure a lot of us know people in all these situations. Okay. Other island and continent, yep. Okay, can we see the results? So lots of people on the continent are on a different island. No one in a different country, so that's good. Within driving distance, also good. Okay, so when we are away from home, from the perspective of a person on the mainland, it's really easy to develop homesickness. And so for those of us who've never really experienced homesickness, this is what it can look like. So there's some psychological effects such as persistent feelings of loneliness and feeling out of place, low mood, lack of motivation, lack of security, and high anxiety. I know that persistent feelings of loneliness are really pertinent to me and a lot of my friends who are up here and away from their families, especially not knowing if it's what's going on back home and if we'll be able to go home anytime soon. And there's also these physical symptoms such as fatigue, poor appetite, sleep disturbances, headaches, and unexplainable pain. Next slide. Okay. So researchers have found that quarantining away from home can understandably worsen homesickness. And this is mostly due to all of the uncertainty and insecurity right now that COVID has caused. When someone isn't home with their family and friends, it can feel really overwhelming to not know what's going on with them and whether or not they'll be okay. And this might lead someone to feel very helpless or powerless. And for students who are starting school, there could be a lot of uncertainty regarding the school year. And I can't imagine how hard it must be for students who left home for the first time to start school, and how hard that must be for them. And it's also really important to recognize that these are extremely valid concerns and that no one is weak for feeling homesick. It's 100% what makes us human. And so this is a quote that I liked from an article written by Native scholars on developing a sense of belonging and maintaining cultural identity on a college campus away from home. It says, isolation has a different cultural meaning for Native peoples due to their relationship to place and land. Native identity is frequently relational in nature, which means that isolation is more than simple loneliness, but rather it's separating Native people from who they are. And I really like that article. I pretty much cite it in like all of my research papers. But the researchers basically talked about how we can create a community or a home away from home while we are not with our families or not on our homeland. So I adapted some of these to be more fitting to the times of COVID and to be more in line with Native Hawaiian culture. But the first way we can create a home away from home is through familial affirmation. And this includes using encouraging language. So parents, siblings, etc., it's important to send your college students or friends working out of island text messages like, "You're doing awesome, keep it up," or "I'm so proud of you." And doing this can help to foster an interdependent sense of self, which is when we view ourselves as being a part of a community in which everyone relies on each other. And so I have this quote in the parentheses that says, "If being away from home for work or school is what is needed to support my family or community out, then I have to do it." And that's kind of building that sense that everything we do is for a community. The next one is cultural affirmation. And so to put it simply, it means staying connected with your culture by forming or maintaining connections with others, either in person or online, who have similar cultural backgrounds as you. So finding a Native Hawaiian community online or close to you, or even just a group of people from Hawaii with whom you can connect online or in person, following social distancing guidelines, of course. And doing this can help to ground you in your culture and strengthen your cultural ties. We can also build a home away from home by connecting with others who are in similar situations as us. So finding others who are living away from home, or finding someone who you have a lot in common with. Maybe you both like football or volleyball and you can bond over that, or maybe you both have dogs and you can bond over that. We can strengthen connections that we already have or strengthen or establish connections by talking story. And that's how we communicate, right? So it's really important to share stories related to your culture or who you are as a person. And sometimes when we communicate with people who are unfamiliar with our culture, it can feel very distant and formal. And so when we talk story, we break down that distance and it helps us connect or strengthen our connections with others. We can also create a home away from home by viewing friends as extended family. So even the ones who you don't chat with frequently or the ones who you don't have a lot in common with, we can view them as like our distant cousins or relatives. And in doing this, we also start to break down the walls in our connections with them, and we can more readily rely on them. And finally, it's very, very important to maintain your connections at home. So calling and texting your family and friends regularly, because you will need that support system during this time. And next slide. Okay.
So these are just some resources that we put together, and I'm actually going to paste and send this in the chat. So yeah, if you are someone you know is experiencing a crisis, there are supports out there. These are the easily accessible resources out there. So they even have a text line to text now. So how savvy, right? When we're really adapting to the times, they now have a text 741 741. That's there. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is also there. I mean, there's resources out there. So if you or someone needs that support, please get that support. We've also added some additional resources, just national resources that you can also seek help. They're on the next few slides. So when this presentation or the recording does come out, all that information will definitely be on there. Yeah, I think there's a few more slides of resources. But we just, want to say thank you so much for taking the time again to listen, to hear our mana'o, and we truly hope that you guys found something to help you or someone that you know in your life during this time. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you again for allowing us to be here.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will actually open it up to questions. If you want to put them in the chat or in the Q&A feature, that's fine. I do want to ask Kyana-lei, and I know I asked this too earlier, but so where are you in relation to the fires? I mean, to add to all this that you just talked about is natural, you can't control.
Yeah, I think I'm about 35 minutes away from the closest fire. And luckily where I live, there's lots of concrete and buildings, which are less likely to set on fire. And yeah, there's just like a yellow haze all over the sky. So that's been kind of weird. And my friends right now are staying with me. So yeah, it's been weird, but I feel very blessed that I have a place to stay that's pretty far away from the fires.
That's awesome. Anybody else have any questions? I mean, awesome that you're fine, but also, just thinking of the others that, have been affected by these and impacted by them. So yeah. That was a great presentation. I love the polls. Does anybody have any questions? We'll just hang around a little bit longer. We do have until 10:30. If there was anything that you folks, Kyana-lei or Kahanaaloha, wanted to bring up?
No, I mean, Kyana-lei, her presentation is so relevant right now for a lot of people, and especially thinking of those who are away at school. And like you mentioned, if this is their first year, wow, that's a take on. I think remembering back to when I was in college and the fear of already, you know, being away from your family for the first time and not really having immediate supports right there. And then top all of this on, and then now fires. I have, you know, family who are in California as well, who are impacted, not directly, but just the ash that's in the sky, you know, that their towns are covered with this like eerie cloud of just, you know, gray black smoke. So definitely praying everyone's safe, stay safe.
Right. So Kyana-lei, what do you miss eating the most from here?
I want poke.
Aww.
There is poke up here, but it's not the same.
Right. I lived in Portland for 4 years. Are you close to any like Hawaiian, like lunch type places?
Yeah, like I think like 5 minutes from here, there's a place called 808 Grinds, and I think the owners are alumni of Kamehameha. But I'm not entirely sure. I don't go there very often. But
808 Grinds. All right. I wonder if I check that out.
yeah.
Okay, well,
all the pandemic stuff, just like small businesses. Because I know, yeah, here in Kauai, we're trying to support local with all the small business restaurants and just small business in general, trying to keep them afloat.
Yeah. All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, mahalo for joining us today, taking time out of your day. Please do fill out the evaluation. And if you have to run and you don't have time to do it right now, I'll follow up with an email on Monday. And I don't know if, Kim, if there's anything you wanted to share that's coming up with other webinars.
Oh, thank you so much for asking, Lisa. Next week, well, all month long, all the month of September is Hawaiian History Month, and there's a different theme each of the 5 weeks in September, and there are 5. Next week, the theme is Ho'ola. So Papaola Lokahi, Hahui o Nakauka, and the Department of Native Hawaiian Health at the university has partnered to bring you 6 different panels over 3 different time periods. So next Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock, September 16th, we're going to launch our series with Dr. Ben Young doing a history of Hawaiian health and medicine. And then we have our theme for Friday evening, September 18th, is about traditional healing. And Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock, we've got Aina Momona Aipono. We've got some really awesome Aina health history based talk stories coming up. So next week, Ho'ola health, but really the entire month series of programming. So thanks, Lisa, for letting us plug that.
Of course, so they can find out more information at our social media sites, correct?
On our social media sites, on the social media, or they just Google Hawaiian History Month, or their websites with Hawaii Pono'i Coalition.
All right, so we are, Papaola Lokahi is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter also as well. And I think that's about it. So again, mahalo to Dr. Kahanaaloha and Kyana-lei for spending time with us today. It was a great presentation. And I hope everybody else has a great weekend, and we'll keep in touch. So malama pono.